Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Krishna Krishna Hare
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Pariprajaka Ashto Tarasatashi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Jayādvaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navdeep Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome to our reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's December 15th, 2022 in New York, one day later in Vrindavan. And we're reading from Adi Lila, chapter 4, text 160. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Vena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Vena Bhutale Swayam Rupakala Manisham Tathati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. As you'll recall, Sri Kaviraj Goswami is describing the confidential reasons for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. He's been glossing, explaining his the sixth verse of his invocation. Sri Radhaya Pranaya Mahima Kidrisho Banayaiva Swadyo Yenad Bhuta Madhurima Kidrisho Va Madiya Sokyam Chasya Mad Anubhavata Kidrisham Veti Lobhat Tadbhavadya Samajani Sachigarva Sindho Havindu. The three confidential reasons have been mentioned in this verse. He desired to understand the glory of Srimati Radharani's love, the wonderful qualities of him, of himself that she relishes, and the sweetness, the happiness that she feels from the sweetness of his love. Sokyam chasya, sokyam chasya mad anubhavata kidrisham veti lobha. What kind of happiness does she get from realizing the sweetness of my love? So the Kaviraj Goswami has described the first two of these reasons. He's explored the first two. Now he wants to speak about the third. Atyanta nigurta e rasher shitanta sharup goshai matra janin ekanta. This conclusion of rasa is extremely deep. Only Swarup Damodar knows much about it. Yeva keha onya jane shehotaha hoite chaitanya goshayar teha atyanta marmayate. Anyone else who claims to know it must have heard it from him, for he was the most intimate companion of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Swarup Damodar Goswami was very confidentially associated with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially in the Lord's later pastimes at Jagannath Puri. He intimately understood Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood or moods, and would enhance the Lord's feelings by chanting different kinds of verses, singing different verses. And Kaviraj Goswami says that anyone who claims to understand these confidential reasons for Lord Chaitanya's appearance must have understood them from Swarup Damodar. Gopiganer Premier Ruta Bhavanam Vishuddha Nirmal Prema Kabhu Nahikam. The love of the gopis is called Ruta Bhav. It is pure and spotless. It is not at any time lust. Purport. As already explained, the position of the gopis in their loving dealings with Krishna is transcendental. Their emotion is called Ruta Bhav. Although it is apparently like mundane sex, one should not confuse it with mundane sexual love, for it is pure and unadulterated love of Godhead. Premaiva gopi ramanam kama ityagamat patam ityuddhavadeyo pyetam vanchanti bhagavat priyaha. The pure love of the gopis has become celebrated by the name lust. The dear devotees of the Lord, headed by Sri Uddhava, desire to taste that love. This is a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 1-2-285. Kama prema doha kar ibina lakan loha ar hemo yoiche shorupe ilakan. Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. Purport. One should try to discriminate between sexual love and pure love, for they belong to different categories, with a gulf of difference between them. They are as different from one another as iron is from gold. Atmendriya Priti Vancha Tare Bolik Kam Krishnendriyo Priti Ichcha Tare Premanam. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust. But the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. Purport. The revealed scriptures describe pure love as follows. Sarvata dvangsa rahitam satyapi dvangshakarane yadbhava bandhanam yuno suprema parikirtitaha. If there is ample reason for the dissolution of a conjugal relationship, and yet such a dissolution does not take place, such a relationship of intimate love is called pure. The predominated gopis were bound to Krishna in such pure love. For them, there was no question of sexual love based on sense gratification. Their only engagement in life was to see Krishna happy in all respects, regardless of their own personal interests. They dedicated their souls only for the satisfaction of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. There was not the slightest tinge of sexual love between the gopis and Krishna. The author of Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita asserts with authority that sexual love is a matter of personal sense enjoyment. All the regulative principles in the Vedas pertaining to desires for popularity, fatherhood, wealth, and so on are different phases of sense gratification. Acts of sense gratification may be performed under the cover of public welfare, nationalism, religion, altruism, ethical codes, biblical codes, health directives, fruitive action, bashfulness, tolerance, personal comfort, liberation from material bondage, progress, family affection, or fear of social ostracism or legal punishment. But all these categories are different subdivisions of one substance, sense gratification. All such good acts are performed basically for one's own sense gratification, for no one can sacrifice his personal interest while discharging these much advertised moral and religious principles. But above all this is a transcendental stage in which one feels himself to be only an eternal servitor of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. All acts performed in this sense of servitude are called pure love of God, because they are performed for the absolute sense gratification of Sri Krishna. However, any act performed for the purpose of enjoying its fruits or results is an act of sense gratification. Such actions are visible sometimes in gross and sometimes in subtle forms. Atmendriya Priti Vancha Toribali Kam. The desire to satisfy one's own senses is kama, or lust, sense gratification. And Krishnendriya Priti Vancha Tari Premana, the desire to please Krishna's senses, is prema. The difference between them, Kaviraj Goswami says, is like the difference between iron and gold. They're both metals, so you could say they're the same, but there's a huge difference between iron and gold. The girls don't swoon when you give them an iron earring. Gold is another thing entirely. So it's wonderful here that Srila Prabhupada identifies various covers under which calm sense gratification may appear. Public welfare, nationalism, religion, altruism, ethical codes, biblical codes, health directives. There's a long list of excuses, really, for one's own sense gratification. And they're all put forward as being something to take very seriously: national pride or national loyalty, fear of social ostracism or legal punishment, altruism, philanthropy, ethics, this, that. Well, just like Arjuna, he's giving so many excuses for why he doesn't want to do something that would be contrary to his own personal interests. And it all sounds very noble. And Krishna says, this is all rubbish. So, Kaviraj Goswami wants us to understand that the dealings of the gopis with Krishna, although apparently like the dealings of young girls with young boys in the material world, is entirely different. The difference is like that between iron and gold. The gopis have no interest at all in their own sense gratification. They're simply absorbed in trying to please the transcendental senses of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Without that understanding, one cannot possibly understand the dealings of Krishna and the gopis as they are. One will have a distorted, perverted misunderstanding. This is the basic principle for understanding the dealings of the spiritual world. Everything on the transcendental platform is done exclusively for the pleasure of Krishna. Any comments or questions here? Well, drink another sip and we'll be ready to go. Kamer tatparja nija sambhoga keval Krishna shuka tatparja matra prema ta prabal. The object of lust is only the enjoyment of one's own senses. But love caters to the enjoyment of Lord Krishna, and thus it is very powerful. It's interesting, Kaviraj Goswami uses the term tatparja, which is our term for purport in all of our books in Hindi and other languages. Tatparja is your purport. So the purport of all these items, your philanthropy and altruism and national loyalty and progress, the purport is, I want to enjoy my senses. And the purport of activity in prema is, I want to satisfy Krishna's senses. Loka dharma, beta dharma, deha dharma, karma, lajja, dharya, deha shuka, atma shuka, morma, tustyaja, aryepata, vijja parijan, swajane, kodoye, yata, paravana, parsan, sharbhatya, kodi, kode, krishner bhajan, Krishna Shuka Hetu Kore Prema Sevan. Social customs, scriptural injunctions, bodily pleasures, self-gratification, and the path of varnashram dharma, which is difficult to give up. The gopis have forsaken all these, as well as their own relatives and their punishment and scolding, for the sake of serving Lord Krishna. They render loving service to him for the sake of his enjoyment. We can see here where Srila Prabhupada is drawing that description from of various covers for sense enjoyment. Ihake kahiye Krishne Jita Anurag Swachchato Tabasre Dvaiche Nahi Kongdag. This is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure, like a clean cloth that has no stain. Purport. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita advises everyone to give up all engagements of sense gratification and, like the gopis, dovetail oneself entirely with the will of the Supreme Lord. That is the ultimate instruction of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We should be prepared to do anything and everything to please the Lord, even at the risk of violating the Vedic principles or ethical laws. That is the standard of love of Godhead. Such activities in pure love of Godhead are as spotless as white linen that has been completely washed. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur warns us in this connection that we should not mistakenly think that the idea of giving up everything implies the renunciation of duties necessary in relation to the body and mind. Even such duties are not sense gratification if they are undertaken in a spirit of service to Krishna. It's not that everything should just be given up. All duties should just be thrown out. But everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna, or otherwise not done. Now, there's a question in the chat box from Tina, which got lost just because there's so much coming in the chat box. How about devotees in the Grihastha ashram? I know that's a license for sense gratification, but there are some senior devotees who literally live to serve Krishna. Everything is Krishna for them, and the man is a family man. Saying he is using fatherhood as a cover for sense gratification just doesn't seem right. His children are the poster children for Krishna consciousness. I've heard also that Grihastha ashram means children. Yes, these Dharmaviruddha bhuteshu kamosmi paratarshana. The Krishna says that sex undertaken for his pleasure, that is dharma virud, sex that's not contrary to religious principles, also represents him. It can also be taken on as devotional service. Then it's not counted as only lust. Generally, it's taken that, well, because there's lust, we accept marriage. But then even the lusty activity should be engaged for the service of Krishna, and then it becomes purified. There's a sort of notion that the Grahastha ashram provides a sort of limitless license for sense gratification, that the highest standard is only to have sex for the purpose of having children. So only once a month for the sake of procreation. But then there's a lesser standard that, well, once a month with or without procreation in mind. And then there's still a third standard that, well, at least husband and wife. And that Srila Prabhupada taught all three of these standards, that he endorsed all three of them. He certainly favored the highest standard, but he thought it was quite acceptable to follow a lower standard. He taught that it was acceptable to follow the lesser standard, as it's sometimes described. This is contrary to what Srila Prabhupada actually taught. Bhagavatam 5.1.49. Sex is allowed only for the begetting of children, not for enjoyment. One can indulge in sex to beget a good child for the benefit of the family, society, and world. Otherwise, sex is against rules. Similarly, Prabhupada said in a lecture in New York in 1966, sex life is a religious principle in this way, that when you want a good child, in that sense, if you undertake sex life, that is sanctioned, that is religion. And without that, everything sex life is non-religion. And in 1974 in Bombay, on a morning walk, wife is accepted only for getting a son, not for sexual. Putrarte kriyate parya, one wife for the sake of a child. So when you have sex life simply for generating good son, that is Krishna. And if you want to enjoy your senses, that is pap. Pap means sinful activity. Explaining Dharma Aviruddha Bhuteshu Kamosmi, Srila Prabhupada said, even in your married life, if you indulge in sex life more than once in a month or in pregnancy, that is against religious principle. And in 1971, so religious principles, then you become sinful. And if you become sinful, then you cannot make towards spiritual realization. So this is what Srila Prabhupada taught, that sex should be undertaken for the service of Krishna, which means only for the sake of begetting children, therefore only once in a month, the purpose in mind. So that's done. Naturally, the senses will get some satisfaction, but it's a byproduct, as it were, of service, or it's, it's under the program is undertaken for the sake of service, and sense gratification will also be there. Of course, for those who are less advanced, the main purpose is sense gratification, but they follow these principles, and they get their sense gratification, and they serve Krishna. But those who are more advanced are thinking, let us please Krishna, and our senses will also automatically be pleased. That's not the point, but that will also be there. So your question, that fatherhood as a cover-up, sort of, for sense gratification. No, it's taken that this is now a responsibility. Sex means children, and when the children are there, we have to train them nicely to become devotees of Krishna, so that their whole life will be successful and Krishna will be pleased. Simply to produce children like cats and dogs, Prabhupada said, is not wanted. Or even dharmic karmis. We have nice children who follow some principles of dharma. They're basically karmis, but they do something Krishna conscious. Even that is not considered very wonderful. The real purpose is that the child should become a devotee of Krishna and become free from the cycle of birth and death, develop love of Krishna and go back to Godhead. That's the purpose. One shouldn't become a father or mother just for sense enjoyment. One should become a father or mother to bring into this world a child that one can free from the cycle of birth and death, and who can also help others become free. Then it's good. Anything clear about that? Okay. Now moving down. Meena asks, how do we know Krishna is pleased? Just following the rules? Well, yes. When the spiritual master tells us do this, do that, or Shastra tells us do this, do that, then yes, Krishna becomes pleased. Yes, he's doing this. He's following. Now, that may not be the highest standard of pleasure for Krishna. Yes, he followed the 4 rules, or yes, he chanted Gayatri mantra 3 times a day, or he did follow this rule or follow that rule. We read earlier that Krishna doesn't become so pleased just if one is following rules and regulations. There are so many smart Brahmins who follow lots of rules and regulations, but Krishna is not particularly pleased. So we want to develop that eagerness to please Krishna, that eagerness to serve Krishna. eagerness to serve the spiritual master. The devotees who follow the orders of the spiritual master please him. Certainly, it's very nice to see disciples who are obedient, who are following. That's wonderful. Why do we become troubled to see disciples who don't follow or follow in spotty or haphazard fashion? If someone follows, that's pleasing. But if someone goes all out to satisfy the spiritual master, then the spiritual master becomes exceedingly pleased. Devotees are going out, sacrificing so many comforts to read books. How pleased the spiritual master becomes. They're sacrificing their own personal interests to help others. So this is more pleasing, more pleasing. And Prabhupada elsewhere says that when the spiritual master sees that the disciples are becoming advanced, he becomes more pleased. And not just that they're following the rules and regulations and they sort of stay the same forever, but then they make progress and it becomes pleased. Yes, they're developing a taste for chanting and hearing. They're developing a taste for reading the books. They're developing a taste for serving the deity. They're eager to serve. That also is pleasing. Saraswati asks, is reproduction using the IV method, that's in vitro method, acceptable for infertile couples? I know someone who didn't want to get married, but who wanted children and went to a sperm bank. Is that acceptable? I don't know any Shastric references about these things. It was not done in Vedic times, although there were unusual methods of begetting back then. Children born of coconut trees and children born of mangoes. The wife was advised each to eat a fruit, and then she'd beget a child. Of course, that may have also been with the help of the husband and sexual intercourse. But in any case, there were unusual ways of begetting a child. So infertile couples. So first of all, we find that there is marriage here, there is a stable family. I don't see any specific objection here. The child will be there, the parents will be there. The intention is that the child become a devotee. So I don't see anything irreligious, particularly irreligious here. I don't have much of an opinion about it. The alternative, of course, is adoption, which is definitely, which is first of all lower tech, second of all provides a home for a child who otherwise might not have a suitable home, and third of all, it has a long tradition in Vedic culture. We hear of various instances where couples adopted a child, and even our Krishna was an adopted child. So that's entirely accepted. Praveen, why would Prabhupada say once a month if it is for procreation? He could just say for procreation. Just for procreation is higher standard, but the other standard Prabhupada acknowledges once a month for those who cannot follow the higher standard. It's a little convoluted, that question. he said it's a package here. The idea is that the time chosen is the time of greatest fertility, the time when we most expect that there would be a child. There are religions that provide for sex at the time of least fertility, and they're sort of complicated ways to determine when is that time. And so that's the time that's aspired for, that's the time they shoot for, is when there's the least opportunity for pregnancy. But here, the entire point appears to be that there should be a child, and that's why you have sex. That's why you have sex. Just like I may go out and distribute books, and at the same time, I'm going out in the sun and I'm getting a lot of vitamin D3, and that's good for my health. But that's not why I'm going out there. It's not for the vitamin D3 or for the exercise that I might get from carrying books around, or for some similar benefit. I'll get those things also. It will be good for my health to go out and do some active work and so on. But the point is to distribute books. And even if it's not good for my health, if it's cold, if it's rainy, still I'll go. So here are the purposes to have a child. And naturally there'll be sense gratification in the process. That's nature's arrangement. But it's not that, well, let me have sense gratification. Child or no child, marriage means sex. What's the point of being married if you can't have sex? And what's the point of once a month? That's like unrealistic, or what is that? No. Prabhupada's explicit that that's dharma virud. That's contrary to religious principles. Why once a month? Why not twice, 4 times? And let's see if I got your question properly. He could just say for procreation. Why once a month? Because that's regulation. Not that sex should be accepted 4 times a month, 6 times a month, 8 times a month, 10 times a month. No. Then we just, come on, it's just sex. And we say, yes, it's for procreation. It's restricted. Once a month because it's restricted. Why is it restricted? Because it's not so good. For spiritual life, sex should be minimized. And therefore Prabhupada says once a month, not twice, 4 times. The other standard Prabhupada acknowledged is once a month for those who cannot follow the higher standard of only for procreation. But no, Prabhupada doesn't say that. He says one can indulge in sex to beget a good child for the benefit of the family, society, and world. Otherwise, sex is against the rules and regulations of religious life. He doesn't say, well, once a month, that's whatever. He says once a month for begetting children, and elsewhere he says many, many times that the contraceptive methods are sinful. So not once a month for getting a good child, and 3 more times with contraceptives for not getting a child. No. What he's teaching is very clear. It's not only you should do this, but it's also if you don't do this, you're against the rules and regulations. I'm sorry to have to bear that sad news, but that's what it is. He doesn't say this is the highest standard, and if you have a second standard, well, that's fine. He says it's against the rules and regulations of religious life. That's the teaching. And it's not because I'm a sannyasi and sannyasis somehow or other get their kicks from saying these things and spoiling the life of the grihastas. This is what Prabhupada said. And it doesn't matter. I'm maybe whatever I am, a sannyasi or a grihasta or a fool or a misanthrope, whatever. But to say, well, he's just saying that because he's a sannyasi is what they call a genetic fallacy. Genetic has nothing to do in this context with reproduction and cells. It has to do with where does something come from. To try to defeat an argument on the basis of where it comes from, who said it, and what ashram he's in, or what kind of person he is, or what his political affiliation is, or what his reasons might be for giving an argument. That all comes under the category of the genetic fallacy, which is also sometimes known as poisoning the well. Anything that comes from this source can be discarded because it comes from this source. So the argument doesn't have to be listened to. All we have to do is see who made it, and then we know that we don't have to take it seriously. That's in most instances a fault in logic. It's crooked thinking. The exception is when the person is being cited as an authority. If I'm being cited, if Jayādvaita Swami is being cited as an authority on nuclear physics, it's entirely proper to point out that he gets befuddled by simple mathematics and so on. Then that argument is proper. When a person's being cited as authority and you can show that he's not really an authority, that's fine. But otherwise, we run into the genetic fallacy. Because this person's this, we don't have to take the argument seriously. The argument has to be taken on its own strength or weakness, not on the grounds of who said it. So here, of course, it is an argument from authority, and the authority is Srila Prabhupada. This is what Srila Prabhupada taught. Other people may have taught something else, and if we prefer to follow them, that's up to us. But if we claim to be followers of Srila Prabhupada, this is what he taught. Embryos are created. If all of them prove viable, they will often destroy all but one or two, so the woman doesn't have to be pregnant with 3 or more fetuses. Okay, so that's the sort of problem you run into with scientific, the medical approach to fertility and reproduction. So yeah, looking at that, it's not so sweet. The natural and time-honored method is adoption. Parenthetically, it's also the advice of fertility counselors, I understand, that one should have sex many, many times. If you're having sex once a month, oh, forget it. Why did you even come to me? Why did you even come to me? You can't have sex once a month and expect pregnancy. In your case, you need to have sex twice, 4 times a month, every night. Just keep trying till you score. Otherwise, why did you even come to a fertility clinic? That kind of advice is not good. Murari Gupta says, I do things that are not for my own sense gratification, but out of obedience to Prabhupada's instructions and a sense of obligation to him. Nor are they motivated by love of Krishna. They seem to be neither lust nor love motivated. So what category do they fall in? You can say neutral, or you could say in the process of developing love. To follow the orders of the spiritual master may not reflect the highest love of Krishna, but it means I've accepted the process for developing love for Krishna. And if I continue in this process, I'll come to that point. Prabhupada said green mango and ripe mango. Mango may be green, but this is the beginning. The Kendra points us to the purport to Bhagavatam 7:12-11. It's sometimes misunderstood that a grahastha householder is permitted to indulge in sex at any time. This is a wrong conception of grahastha life. In spiritual life, whether one is a grahastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi, or brahmachari, everyone is under the control of the spiritual master. Saraswati says, there were religious kings that married many wives, so an argument can be made that they had it easy. Well, yes, you could say that because of their pious activities, they became kings, and because they were kings, they had greater opportunities for sense gratification. So that may be true. On the other hand, they had the opportunity for greater entanglement, to have many queens and more sex. The standard for this is not all that helpful for spiritual progress. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu refused to meet Prataparudra. King means sense gratification, Vishayi. So, you can become Indra, you can become a king, and then you have greater facility and it's even legal. But it's not all that helpful for spiritual progress. And Burai Gupta says, nowadays, many wives is hardly easier. It wasn't easier back then even, but certainly now it's a hardship even to maintain one wife. And Tulsi Priya says that, and the king is responsible for protecting and maintaining all those women. And he has to maintain the wives and the children. And he has to deal with his what increased sexual involvement does to your mind and senses. So he becomes entangled. Yes. All right. So we're at our end. We wound up talking more about lust than love, I think. But it's necessary because we need to discriminate between the two. Atmendriya Priti Vancha Tare Bole Kam. Krishnendriya Priti Vancha Tare Prema. To act for one's own sense gratification is lust, and to act entirely for the satisfaction of Krishna is called love. Shall we have kirtan? Radhesha, how do you feel about leading kirtan?
All right. I don't have any instruments or anything. Or actually, I have a harmonium, but we'll leave it alone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Pariprataka Ashto Tarasatashi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Ahimsakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Jayādvaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadip Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri ki jai, Gangamai ki jai, Jamunamai ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveta Bhakti Vrita ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna Lakshmana. And Hare Krishna to all. We'll jump into our morning program and perhaps see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.